Hello there, and welcome to something that's a little bit different to what I normally do. For some context, I am a fan of a little brand called Peach Riot, which is essentially a virtual girl band that have a series of figures that are made by Pop Mart. You know, the people who gave you Labubu and such. Make of that as you will. Now, I first came across Peach Riot at a convention in Birmingham some years back, and I found the figures to be quite charming, so I bought a couple, and decided that it would be fun to open some on camera and have a good look at them. I have done this twice with the Rise Up and the Rush Hour series, but there was one series that I couldn't quite get my hands on for the longest time, which was the Punk Fairy series, and after a lot of searching for a complete box set, I managed to find one for a good price and recorded myself opening the figures and giving them a quick overview. And then my computer crashed and everything was gone. All of my work, my projects, all my other videos I was planning to upload onto YouTube, and of course, this Peach Riot video, all completely erased like Thanos had snapped them out of existence. Which of course left me with a conundrum. Even though I wanted these figures, I also wanted to open them on camera because I thought it would be fun to do. But with no footage left to work on, I was essentially left with nothing to do really. Until I had a thought. Why not do a listicle video where I judged these figures and see which one is my favourite? And this is what we're going to do. Yes, these 12 figures of 3 fictional girls are going to be ranked by some random guy on YouTube whose luck with technology is absolutely abysmal. Which ones do I find to be very nice to look at? Are there any that have grown on me since I first clocked eyes on them? Is there any of them which I'm not keen on and think that their inclusion in the series is misplaced? Well, let's delve into the world of fairies, punk and magic as I rate my favourite figures from the Peach Riot Punk Fairy series. Also, as a side note, this list will not include the secret rare Poppy figure, as I don't have that figure, so I can't judge it fairly with the other ones. I could pick one up on eBay, but these figures aren't exactly cheap to get hold of, and the bills aren't going to pay themselves, so with all that being said, let's get cracking with the list.
Did you up on the battlefield with the fairies better have a shield?
Now, as much as I like this figure, when compared to the rest of this series, which is going for a theme of fairies, flowers and enchantment, this figure frankly doesn't say any of that. If you were to show me this figure in isolation and ask me which series this was from, I would have said the Rise Up series. The best way for me to describe this figure is it's pretty bland and inconsequential when the rest of the figures in this series are going for a specific theme of magical fairy whimsy. Like I said, I like this figure, but its generic feel holds it back by a massive margin when we take a look at the rest of the figures.
Did you up on the battlefield with the fairies better have a shield?
I feel like I'm going to be saying these words over and over again for the rest of the video, but I really do like this figure, and it's much more creatively appealing to look at than the Frankie figure, but this has to be my least favourite of the Gigi figures. I think what's holding me back is that the icy colour scheme on this figure doesn't really blend too well with Gigi. It almost feels too soft of a colour for Gigi, who I consider to be the punkier member of Peach Riot, so bolder colours would definitely suit her much better than this pastel icy blue white colour. Also, as a minor nitpick, the guitar was an absolute bugger to stick on to the figure's hands, which constantly popped out even after applying a lot of pressure to the thing. The fact that I've got it to stay on for this long is a miracle, but other than those two relatively small drawbacks, this is a really good figure. It really is.
Did you up on the battlefield with the fairies better have a shield?
If there's one positive thing I can say about the Gigi Ice figure is that it at least stands out when compared to the other Gigi figures in this series, because from here on out it's all green for Gigi, though I think the green is more suited to Gigi than the ice blue that the previous figure had when it comes to this series. The green on this and the remaining Gigi figures has this very earthy tone to them which suits the whole magical forest vibe this series is going for. This figure is nicely detailed, though if I do have to make a nitpick on it, then I would have to say that the pink on the guitar is the weakest part of it. I feel as though the pink doesn't really go well with the green that the figure has, and it's quite jarring to look at. I know that the figure does have some pink details upon it, but the guitar is much more noticeable and almost feels like I've given Gigi the wrong guitar to hold. All that aside, I really like this figure, but perhaps the guitar could have been a different colour to make it look better.
Did you up on the battlefield
Another Frankie figure, and this one is way better than the last one we looked at. I can at least tell that this is meant to be a fairy punk themed figure, whereas the last one looked as though it could have come out of any series that Peach Riot has ever done. Now this figure feels like it's very combat-y, almost as if Frankie is at some military boot camp, which I do find interesting, and it certainly leans towards the more badass vibe that this series was going for. Once again though, my nitpick with this figure is the guitar. It's a nice guitar that's got a really unique design to it, which makes it stand out to the other guitars that Peach Riot have done, but the problem I have with it, and it's a very minor nitpick, is that it's a bit tricky to position on the figure. It just sort of floats in midair, and trying to get it into the position that is shown in the promotional pictures is very tricky. I suppose if we must play devil's advocate, this is a magic guitar and simply floats about waiting to be played, which is probably going to be my personal headcanon for this figure.
Did you out on the battlefield with the fairies that had shield?
Out of the three girls in Peach Riot, Poppy feels like she is the best suited for this series that revolves around fairies and magic. I do see her as the most feminine of the three girls, and given that there's a secret figure of Poppy within the series, it makes the most sense that Poppy would get the better treatment when it comes to aesthetic designs for the series. All of them are really lovely to look at, and really sell the concept of magical girl power, but despite loving this Poppy figure a lot, it does feel somewhat unfortunate that I have to give it this particular spot in the list. It's a great figure, don't get me wrong, but compared to the other Poppy figures and what's left of Frankie and Gigi, it has to be the weakest of the four. That might sound like a negative, though when you think about it, it's a pretty fair compliment given how good the remaining Poppy figures are.
Did you out on the battlefield with the fairies that had shield?
The third Gigi figure in our countdown, and this one really fits the vibe of a punk fairy really nicely. Not too flashy, not too over the top, and it's just the right balance of both magical and rebellious that the series is going for. The earthy colours go so well with the figure. I really love the leaf green colour wings, and the yellow goggles on her head are vibrant but not too distracting, which the previous Gigi figure suffered from. If you were to show me this figure in isolation and say that this comes from a series called Punk Fairy, then I would look at the figure and go, yeah, I can definitely see that. There's honestly nothing more I can say about this figure because it just ticks all the boxes that the series is going for. It's a perfect 50-50 split between fairy and punk.
Did you out on the battlefield with the fairies that had shield?
Poppy's second appearance on this list, and once again, she is really suited to the series over Gigi and Frankie. The pinky dress really suits Poppy well and gives off this springtime feel to the figure, which would certainly go well with the whole magical forest feel that this series is going for. I really like the flower that Poppy is holding, even if it was a tad filly to put on though. It's got a cute little smile which they didn't need to give, but it makes the thing look more charming to see. I will say now that Poppy's figures lean more towards the fairy aspects of this series, with Gigi being more of a punk girl and Frankie acting as an in-between for both styles, which feels right for the three, with this figure in particular perfectly suiting the whole whimsical vibe.
Did you out on the battlefield with the fairies that had shield?
Into the top 5 we go, and this Frankie figure is a great introduction to what I consider to be the cream of the crop when it comes to this series. An absolutely charming figure to say the least, this Frankie figure really invokes the theme of magical fairies that are tiny creatures which live amongst the flowers, and in this case, lily pads. I absolutely adore the green that this figure has, as it feels like Frankie's dress was made up from green leaves. The figure and lily pad aren't connected, which makes sense as it's a fairly big figure in comparison to the others, though I thought that you could pose the figure without the lily pad as though Frankie is bending over slightly to look down at something, but the figure can't really stand on its own. It's no big issue at the end of the day, as the figure really is cute and lovely to look at, and I'm glad that I got this figure in my collection.
Did you out on the battlefield with the fairies that had shield?
The final Gigi figure breaks into the 4th position, and out of all of the figures in this series, this one in particular encapsulates the theme of fairies and punk the best. It's no surprise that this figure is used on the boxes and promotional images for this series, as it's a perfect mix of the two themes of rebellious punk and magical forest dweller. The figure is beautifully designed with a nice blend of earthy colours, and it is definitely the most dynamically posed figure out of this series. The mushroom really helps create the world of a magical forest, much like the lily pad figure and the remaining figures we have left to see. Overall, this is a fantastic figure, and is easily my favourite Gigi figure out of the Punk Fairy series, and quite possibly out of all the Gigi figures that I own.
Did you out on the battlefield with the fairies that had shield?
Undoubtedly one of my favourite Frankie figures, not only in this series, but all of Peach Riot as it is. Sunflower is a gorgeous figure to behold and is a perfect addition to the Peach Riot collection. The colours on this figure are so vibrant and summery, making this figure in particular the brightest and boldest figure of the Punk Fairy series. Even though I said earlier on in the video that Poppy was more suitable for the series, what with its theming, this Frankie figure is a very close second to the Poppy figures. It's a charming figure that is so beautifully detailed and can brighten up anyone's collection of Peach Riot.
Did you out on the battlefield with the fairies that had shield?
I was really torn about where to put these last two figures because they are so amazing to look at. Both of them honestly could be number one, and I wouldn't mind one bit. However, I feel like that would be a bit of a cheeky cop-out, so one of them has to take the silver medal whether I like it or not. And that recipient is going to be Acorn. I love this figure so much. It's cute, the colour scheme on it really screams nature and wonderment of a magical forest, and it gives off the perspective that Poppy is just a magical fairy sitting atop a fallen acorn, which is really adorable. If I were to make a diorama of a forest and want to inject some magical whimsy to it, then this Poppy figure would certainly look good amongst the diorama. It may not be as punky as some of the other figures, but as I said earlier on, Poppy is more suited to the fairy side of this series, and this and the final Poppy figure really encapsulate that side of the Punk Fairy. Acorn is a terrific figure, I absolutely love it. It's such a charming little figure to own, but I have to give number one spot to...
Did you out on the battlefield with the fairies that had shield?
Tree Stump. This figure, it's such an adorable figure that oozes charm, magic, and a slight dash of mischief, making this one of my favourite Peach Riot figures in general. Much like the previous Poppy figure, this one would look perfectly great in a diorama of a forest and will look so nice in a display of other fairy-esque figures that you may have in your collection. The detail on this figure is astounding. From the little reindeer-like antlers on Poppy's head to her wings, and even the stump itself is nicely painted to give off this wooden texture. There's nothing more to say about this figure because it's just so fantastic to look at and praise. It is for certain to be one of the best figures from the Punk Fairy series, and most definitely one of the best figures in my collection of Peach Riot, full stop. And so ends the video. This was quite a fun idea to try out. Whether I'll do it again for future Peach Riot figures is something I'll have to consider. I know that there are some special figures coming out from the series, but getting my hands on them is probably not going to happen anytime soon, given how expensive they are, not to mention the fact that they are possibly limited, and there's also the fact they may not even be available to get hold of in the UK. But whatever happens, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please give the Peach Riot series a try, and while you're at it, if you haven't listened to any of the songs from Peach Riot, I recommend that you check them out. Libby Frame does some amazing songs, and you can check her out on Instagram to see what other things she's up to. So until next time, it's a goodbye from me. One of my favourite Peach Riot figures in general. Much like the previous Pocky... Though I do think that green is more suited to and it certainly leans more towards the badass vibe that this series